Kate Milafalcha, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. Welcome to new subscribers, to returning subscribers, people who stumbled on us accidentally. I'm grateful that you're joining us here, and I hope you'll enjoy this. This is part 2 of at least 2 videos that I'm making about the author, Philip K. Dick. He's a science fiction writer, and you might recognize some of his stories that were made into movies: Blade Runner, Total Recall, Minority Report. He was an extremely respected science fiction writer. And I have done a whole introductory video on him. If you want to go back and find that, I'll try to remember to make a playlist to make it easier on everybody. But that would be Philip K. Dick number 1. This is Philip K. Dick number 2. And we've talked about his life. And now I want to go a little bit more into the themes of his books. Now, I'm not a big science fiction fan. That's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I stumbled on some information about his worldview and themes in his books. And I was struck by how timely and pertinent they seemed. So I just wanted to put this information out there, and I hope you'll find it valuable. So the themes in his books center around a few main topics. There's the fragile nature of reality. He spends a lot of time questioning personal identity. His main characters discover that the world is an illusion. And I've been talking a lot about that in the context of Buddhism and Hinduism and Stoicism and Gnosticism, Plato. It's kind of a common theme. So the world is an illusion that's been assembled by some powerful external entity or entities. He also talks about political conspiracies. Often he has an unreliable narrator in his books. He likes to talk about how reality is not objective. In other words, there's not this well-defined one reality that we all interact with, that there's no single objective reality. It's all a matter of the perception of the individual. And this actually touches not only on philosophy and religion, but on new cutting-edge physics. He talks about the subject of alternate universes, which when he was writing about it, that wasn't a topic that a lot of people talked about. And it wasn't an idea that was as well, not accepted, but as well maybe received by the mainstream science community as it is today. He also talked about simulacra. I can't say it because I want to say simulacrum. Imitations, things that look like something but aren't the actual thing. His characters are usually ordinary people. They're not usually like elite, higher class in the sense of caste. There are no heroes in his books, but there are heroics. And Ursula Le Guin, who was actually a fellow high school student and a fellow science fiction writer, but they never met, she said that one is about his books. One is reminded of Dickens. What counts is the honesty, the constancy, the kindness, and the patience of ordinary people. Something that I noticed, and that I agree with this comment, is that Philip, I call him Philip because I don't like to call him by his last name. Philip was heavily influenced by Carl Jung, the psychologist. He talked a lot about the collective unconscious, about group projection, synchronicities, and personality theory. Lots of these Jungian terms are in his work, and they feel very mundane, ordinary to us today. They weren't at the time. One of his major themes is what constitutes authentic human beings. His characters can look human, but have no soul, no compassion. Blade Runner is a good example of that. He can have aliens that look weird and be very humane and complex, and he can have human beings who have no real origin and have no way of being in the world. They're empty, no empathy. He values compassion, and he values recognizing the oneness of all life, that we're all called to care for each other, that his works are grounded in empathy. That's certainly true. I stumbled on a speech he made, and I was really struck by that because he was an odd person. He had his problems. He had his issues. But there was an innate compassion in him that I felt was palpable. In his books, androids are, they represent more than just like robotic things. They are creatures without empathy. And humans are often like machines. And machines are often more like humans. There's a real crossing of boundaries, a blurring of what is and isn't human or machine, or human or robot. He deals a lot with the theme of mental illness, something that he struggled with, and drug use, something he struggled with. It's all from experience. From his work in 1977 called A Scanner Darkly, he said later, that's the first full novel I ever wrote without speed. He wrote in 1965 The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch about psychedelics. And this was something new to be talking about mainstream. And it's considered the classic LSD novel of all time by Rolling Stone, except that he never had any interaction with LSD until much later after he wrote the novel. A lot of his work is somewhat prophetic, perceptive, prescient in nature. He claimed that drugs never affected him, that they all got, these are his words. These are not my words. I don't believe this. I think this is accurate. No, it's an inaccurate assessment of how things work. I'm not agreeing with him, but this is what he said as a famous writer, that he didn't have to worry about being affected by them because they were processed by his liver before they ever reached his brain. He summed up a certain number of themes: the epistemology and the nature of reality, know thyself, the android and the human, entropy and pot healing, the theodicy problem. This is the vindication of God, how to resolve the problem of, if God is all good, why is there evil in the world? He talked about warfare and power in politics. He talked about evolved humans. He talked about technology, media, drugs, madness. These are all topics that were not front of mind for most people in the late 50s, early 60s. He also wrote under a pen name, Richard Phillips and Jack Dowland. Jack Dowland was a real guy. He just took his name. He was a Renaissance composer, and his best known music was Flow My Tears, was the name of his composition that was best known. And obviously, Philip took that for his title of one of his books. He wrote a character in The Divine Invasion, one of his works, who was called Linda Fox, and she was modeled after Linda Ronstadt, which cracks me up. In his book, the entire body of composition is by Dowland. Within the book, he talks about that. He struggled to understand and rationalize his own paranormal experiences. And I thought these were really interesting and really worth talking about. He wondered, were these divine communication? They made him question his sanity and his perception of reality. So now we talked a bit about it in the first video. He answered the door to a delivery person one day to find a young woman who had one of those Christian fish things on her neck in a necklace in gold, and it sent out a pink beam of light that hit him and changed his consciousness, and he felt like it made him sane for the first time in his life. And it slowly over time devolved into two parallel individuals in his consciousness. So he was himself, and he was this guy Thomas, I think, from the 1st century AD from Rome. And he felt like he was living two separate lives in one. It pertains to some concepts he has we'll talk about later. Just, keep that in mind. He hypothesized that history was stopped in the 1st century AD, that the Roman Empire never ended. Now, he plays with this notion of time. He plays with the notion of time being interrupted, variables in time being changed. And this is certainly a concept that relates to physics, to modern physics. But it also is an explanation in his mind for things that are perceived differently. Now, what's that called? The Mandela effect? Some people believe that he died in prison. Some people believe that he became president. He got out and became president of South Africa. And there are other things underneath that definition, examples under that definition. And he has an explanation for it that's really interesting, which we'll get into. And that explanation would relate to this notion that the Roman Empire stopped in the 1st century, that it never ended. So like the changes in the Roman Empire stopped, that the Roman Empire itself never ended, that it was the pinnacle of materialism and despotism. They forced the Gnostics underground, and that is actually true. That they kept the population enslaved to their worldly possessions, and that this greed and materialism and a lack of empathy for human beings was really symptomatic of that stopping in time, like no more change. Everything stayed that same way. And as time moved forward chronologically and history unfolded, those same values of the Roman Empire simply got handed down. The materialism, the despotism, etc., etc. There's a really good book called Kings, Conquerors, and Psychopaths, which I covered a long time ago. And the guy who wrote it kind of drew the same conclusion, that this is a common thread through history that repeats itself. And this is Philip K. Dick's way of explaining it. It has to do with an anomaly in time, which we'll get to. He thought that Nixon was a current Roman imperial incarnate. Blade Runner was his 1982 movie that was really popular, based on his book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And I mentioned in the last video that I actually rewatched Blade Runner. When I first saw it in the theater, I left early. I just didn't like it. It didn't appeal to me, not my taste. So I decided, I was determined before I made these videos to watch it. So I watched it the other day, and I didn't like it any better. I understood it better. And I sat through the whole thing. I watched the whole thing. But yeah, it was disturbing. A lot of the themes became more obvious to me now than they were in 1982. At the same time, I didn't enjoy the well, there was a lot in it I didn't like. We'll get into it. He wrote the story from which Total Recall, the movie, was made in 1990. The name of the story is We Can Remember It For You Wholesale. And then The Minority Report. That also was one of his books. He wrote a book called Imposter, another called Paycheck. He wrote one called The Adjustment Bureau. And Total Recall, it was made once as a movie, and then it was remade in 2012 with Colin Farrell. I haven't seen it. I should watch that next. The Terminator movies are based on his idea of teams of assassins. Then, of course, there's The Man in the High Castle, which we talked about in the last video, in which the Allies lose the war, the Axis powers win World War II, and how that unfolds, the dystopian nightmare that becomes. It's on Amazon Prime. Minority Report was on Fox, but I wrote it was canceled, so I don't know if you can get it now or not. In 2016, there was a show called Philip K. Dick's Electric Dreams. It was an English and Amazon Prime cooperative venture. Bryan Cranston produced it. Bryan Cranston, Breaking Bad. He also produced 4 works for stage. He did some comic work too. He was a huge influence on a variety of writers and filmmakers. He went to San Diego Comic Con, and they actually, in his honor, had a remote control android of him. And in 2019, the Web Summit robot was made in his honor, I guess you would say. So let me see here how much. Okay, so he gave a speech in 1977, and this speech, you can find it on YouTube. The name of the speech is, "If you find this world bad, you should see some of the others." He was considered one of the great scientific visionaries of the 20th century, and his conclusion when he made this speech was, we live in a simulation. And I don't know if it's where that came from or not. I've always had a hard time understanding what that meant. And I'm hoping that if we go through this speech and talk about the points that he made, maybe it'll be more clear. And I'm not going to go through the whole speech today. It's kind of lengthy. I'll break it off so that I can break this into another video. So if you find this world bad, you should see some of the others. And he said, I may be talking about something that doesn't exist. And therefore, I'm free to say everything or nothing. I thought that was pretty funny. The topic of his talk was orthogonal time. Now, orthogonal means at a right angle. And it's going to a lateral dimension. He called it time as perpendicular to our standard linear flow of time, past, present, and future. So what he's talking about is our understanding of what we call time, which doesn't really exist, is a forward motion chronologically. And theoretically, we could go backwards if we could, but it's in linear alignment, so that, which is a little redundant, but you're just going straight. However, he postulates the notion of you're going along and then you just make a right turn, like a right angle turn. He says that this kind of movement sideways allows us to go into alternative parallel realities. It gives us choices or variations in outcomes of the existing simulation. So what he's getting at is We perceive what we perceive, but we can perceive an alternate version of it if we go to a parallel version of it and change variables. Things will be different. Yeah, this is not easy for me to understand. I'm going to do my best and let me know if it makes any kind of sense. Rather than moving linearly back and forth through time, through the years, you move sideways through realities. And therefore, we're talking about shifts in reality, and these orthogonal systems are independent. They don't influence each other. So they just travel linearly. They don't intersect, but you can go sideways into a different reality. Might also be going sideways into a lateral dimension, but in either case, you're not changing chronological sequence. Time still marches forward, but you're in a whole different parallel, somewhat similar, but different reality. So Philip proposes the universe is a computer program. Now, keep in mind, this was made in the 70s, this speech. I've been thinking about this for a very long time. Nowadays, we toss these ideas out like we know what we're talking about. And they're still difficult to understand, despite our greater familiarity with technology. Imagine how this sounded to somebody in the 60s and 70s. You know, they're still watching Bewitched on TV. You have to get up and change the channel of 3 or 4 channels choices. So he proposed the universe as a computer program in which realities are lateral and can exist simultaneously. So time marches forward, past, present, and future. But if you start going sideways, you hit one reality, another reality, another reality, and they're all existing in the same forward march of time, or backwards, if, you know, we ever time travel. And he says, therefore, time acts as a spatial dimension, because as you progress in time, you go this way, you're in another dimension. Standard time is referred to as the length of time. That makes sense. Lateral time is the width of time. It's a new parallel dimension, one of any number of dimensions that encompass endless possibilities. You could theoretically move laterally across dimensions and not affect the progression of lateral time. So I'll say it again because it took me forever to kind of get a grip on it. So time moves past, present, future, just in a straight line forward into the distance. We don't know how far. And this is true of many other dimensions or realities, but they don't intersect. They all go parallel. They all just go forward in time. We can change our direction. We can go laterally, right or left, make a right angle turn, and enter another reality or another dimension. Now, this opens up explanations for all kinds of interesting things. I found this really fascinating. This may be a familiar concept to a lot of people. It wasn't entirely familiar to me. Or let me put it this way, it clarified things I'd heard about that I didn't fully comprehend. So you have this lateral movement, the width of time, into another dimension that doesn't affect the lateral progression of time. He uses the analogy of chess. He says linear time is the sequence of moves, and a lateral dimension is the alternate moves that you could have made that exist side by side on the board. Physics would call this a fourth dimension continuum. There's a lot of work in this sort of stuff in physics now, and it's fascinating. Okay, let me see here if I'm at a good place to stop. I don't want to break up the themes that he had. I am going to stop here because I feel like if I if I go forward, it gets lengthy and complicated. I don't want to interrupt the flow of the narrative. So we're at a good place to take a little break. And I'll be back soon. I'm not going to wait a whole long time before I record put forward the next video of this. And I hope this interests everybody. We're going to get into some serious philosophy slash physics slash science fiction theory. I don't know. It's all very interesting to me. I don't understand a word of it, but it's very interesting. So thank you for watching. Thank you for indulging my little trip here with Philip K. Dick. And I'll be back soon and we'll look a little more into this. And in the meantime, Slángafoil, Sláinte.